Hello Spartans, you watched my previous video on MSSP versus internal SOCs. Today, I'm going to tell you about what you can expect if you become a SOC analyst on either of these SOC types. So let's begin. Let's start by talking about SOC roles. There are several roles within SecOps teams: manager, engineer, analyst, and incident responder. SecOps teams may also have capabilities such as threat hunting, forensics, reverse engineering, and threat intelligence, but these are usually part of a different department. Now, most SOCs that are worth their salt have analysts that have one or more of the skills that I just mentioned, even if they are not as proficient as a dedicated team. Well-rounded SecOps analysts are a major asset for any company because SecOps usually requires you to have skills across several subfields of the blue team. And if you are wondering what the blue team is, I highly recommend that you check my mini-series on choosing a university degree. In this video, I will focus on only two roles: the analyst and the incident responder, and I will leave the rest of the roles for other videos. Now, bear in mind that different SOCs have different tech, budgets, capabilities, expectations, and roles. But in any case, I will describe the difference between MSSPs and internal SOCs based on my experience working in both environments. Now let's talk about analyst tiers. And quite frankly, we can actually talk about incident responder tiers as well, because while in some companies incident responders are part of a dedicated team, in places such as MSSPs you have incident responders that are more often than not part of the SecOps team. They are just a normal analyst with incident response capabilities. And for simplicity in this video, I will assume they are part of the same team. There are usually three tiers within security operations teams: Tier 1 or juniors, Tier 2 or seniors, and finally Tier 3 or leads. Tier 1 analysts are the most junior type of analyst, and they usually spend most, if not all of their days, looking at sources of alerts, such as SIEMs, log aggregators, firewalls, EDRs, etc. They triage these alerts and escalate them to Tier 2 and Tier 3, depending on the severity and complexity, and usually when these alerts or incidents fall outside of their range of competence. Because within security operations teams, you usually have runbooks, playbooks, standard operating procedures that most, if not all, analysts follow when certain events, alerts, and even incidents come up in the radar. Of course, regardless of how many playbooks, runbooks, and procedures you have in place, any analyst will at some point come across an alert or a type of incident that is not covered by any of the existing processes and procedures. And in this situation, the Tier 1 analysts or junior escalate this to the Tier 2 or senior analysts. Besides looking at activity escalated by Tier 1 analysts, senior analysts or Tier 2 analysts have extra capabilities and tasks such as threat hunting and forensics. Some of you probably know that as a security operations analyst, you are supposed to look at alerts, and alerts are generated based on rules. And these rules are usually created by senior analysts or even other teams within an MSSP or an internal security team of a smaller company. As you can expect, these rules, being hard-coded, are not able to catch every type of activity because the threat landscape is always changing. And this is where threat hunting comes in. Threat hunting is a capability within security teams that allows them to find cutting-edge malware and tactics employed by threat actors. While threat hunting can be quite time-consuming, it can be quite useful because it can allow security teams to find activity that cannot be detected by either existing rules or security third-party providers. The best way to define threat hunting is with the expression finding a needle in a haystack, because usually an analyst needs to sift through large amounts of data, logs, indicators, network activity, and use their experience and knowledge to detect potentially malicious activity. Of course, these teams usually have advanced tooling and capabilities that allow them to sift through large amounts of data, but it still remains a fact that this is an heuristic and not algorithmic approach to finding malicious activity. Forensics, on the other hand, is done during incidents to understand the chain of events that led to the compromise of, say, a laptop. Think CSI Cyber, but with much less nonsense.
Peekaboo! There's actually two codes written right on top of each other.
Based on the findings of these investigations, Tier 2 analysts then propose remediation, steps, or even security measures to other roles in teams such as IT, engineers, and DevOps. Finally, Tier 3 analysts or leads, as the name implies, tend to lead incidents. Given their extensive experience, they know what to look for and where to look for it. They are also the best tier to put together the pieces of a large incident response engagement, supported by other analysts and teams. The analysts in this tier usually have a wide and deep knowledge on multiple fields, such as threat hunting, threat intelligence, reverse engineering, and non-surprisingly, forensics. Now, there is some overlap between Tier 2 and Tier 3, and both seniors and leads are supposed to mentor and onboard new hires to get them up to speed, develop and maintain internal tooling and procedures that are then used and followed by the rest of the SOC, create new rules, automations, playbooks, runbooks that are used either by the existing security stack or junior analysts to handle minor alerts or even incidents. And finally, they also cooperate with teams outside of the SOC, such as the threat research team, malware analysis team, incident responders in the field, depending on the organizational structure and services provided by the company. All of the above tiers contribute in some shape or form to reports generated by the SOC. I will be talking about reports and tickets in a second, because these are the kinds of things that you should be aware of before you join a security operations center. At this point, it should be clear why it is so important that an analyst or a potential candidate should be well-rounded. Incident response and even daily activities performed by security operations teams require you to be able to connect the dots, meaning logs and alerts from different sources, such as firewalls, EDRs, etc. The broader your set of skills, the better you will be at understanding a full chain of compromise. And this is critical if you want to become an elite incident responder or even security operations analyst. I have been quite abstract up to this point. It is now time to talk about the reality of MSSP and internal SOCs. And I will start with MSSP SOCs. As you know, I've started my career working for FireEye, which is now Trellix. At the time, the SOC followed a three-tier structure similar to the one I've mentioned before, but with different naming conventions for each of the tiers. Regardless, the idea was the same. Juniors were responsible for reviewing alerts, the infamous hit review that would cause even the leads to shake in their boots, and writing reports on the activity detected by FireEye's tooling on customer premises. Now, regardless of the tier within that SOC, all of them had some overlap in tasks. Hit review was usually reserved for juniors and sometimes seniors, but in times of overload, leads were requested to step in and support the rest of the SOC. They were all responsible for responding to customers through reports and emails. The creation of rules was usually reserved for seniors and leads in cooperation with the threat hunting and the threat detection team. All of the tiers were responsible for performing forensics on both endpoints and networks. Seniors and leads were responsible for supporting the threat hunting team during threat hunting engagements, which occurred every month. And finally, all the tiers were supposed to cooperate with the incident responders in the field, meaning the incident responders that visited the customers during incidents. Now remember, because we had endpoint agents running on customers' machines, we could easily pull forensics information from anywhere in the world, which is a great thing, especially because our SOC was a follow-the-sun SOC, which I will describe closer to the end of this video. Some of us would use some of the work time to develop internal tooling to help ourselves or other analysts. As you may imagine, more than internal SOCs, MSSP SOCs require automation because the volume of alerts can be quite overwhelming. Now, because FireEye had a follow-the-sun model, junior and senior analysts worked in shifts, 4 days on, 4 days off, only during the day. Leads, on the other hand, had a normal 9 to 5, 5 times a week type of schedule. And in case of a critical incident, they could step in during weekends. There was another role named shift lead, which was the person responsible for assigning tasks to each analyst. There were only a handful of shift leads, and these were usually senior analysts. Given the broad coverage of FireEye's products, it was necessary to allocate SOC resources in a way that not everyone would be looking at the same alert sources. Some people would be looking at endpoint alerts, others would be looking at network alerts, and others would be looking at email security alerts. As I mentioned before, one thing to bear in mind about MSSP SOCs is ticketing and reporting. Because MSSP SOCs have larger teams, potentially spread across several offices and time zones, and they're also a core service within the larger blue team, reporting and ticketing are necessary to keep track of what is going on within the SOC. As a SOC analyst, you will most likely spend your days looking at a SIEM, and usually when you are looking at an alert on a SIEM, you can simply add a comment after investigating and then closing it. However, some MSSPs may force analysts to create reports that can range from a couple of lines to several pages to explain a given alert or incident to a customer. These reports are a way to show value to customers. Think about it this way: if a customer does not get notified for any incidents or alerts, they will think one of two things. Either the MSSP is not paying attention to their network and infrastructure, or they may think that their security posture is so good that they don't really require an external SOC. This all seems reasonable until you find yourself writing several reports in a day for the same activity. I can tell you that it's not fun. Now let's talk about the reality of internal SOCs. Internal SOCs vary widely in the size of teams and resources. Remember that MSSP SOCs provide services to several companies, which is why they must be well staffed. Internal SOCs, on the other hand, are simply a small sub-team within the larger security team. Also, internal SOCs may have more segregation, and you may find that forensics teams are actually part of a different department. And capabilities such as threat hunting, reverse engineering, and threat intelligence can be completely absent, because from a cost perspective, they are not really worthy. Depending on the size of the company, internal SecOps teams may be forced to focus on SOC tasks, but they may also be allowed leeway to manage other parts of the company that require security. As an example, the SecOps team can be responsible for managing the EDR, and they may also be allowed to apply changes to existing AWS SCPs and security policies. Depending on the size and the culture of the company, SecOps teams may have much less red tape when compared to SecOps teams within larger companies or MSSPs. This means that they will most likely have a broader set of skills when compared to their MSSP counterparts. Also, because MSSPs are responsible for protecting several customers, and each one of these customers may have hundreds to thousands of machines, the likelihood of them facing an incident is much higher. This means that MSSP SOCs will on average be busier chasing their own tails compared to internal SOCs that need to focus on a smaller company which has a smaller fleet of devices and by extension a smaller attack surface. Now, some of you may notice that the absence of action can be a problem. While MSSPs spend more time dealing with real incidents and putting out fires, internal SOCs spend more time not only building up the SOC but also sharpening their skills and internal tooling. If you add to this a smaller budget and less advanced tech, you will probably realize that over time your forensics and incident response skills will become rusty. It is part and parcel of this type of SOC, as you will shift your focus to other endeavors and have a broader range of influence when compared to an MSSP SOC. No video about security operations centers is complete without talking about shifts and follow-the-sun models. If you work for an MSSP or a large organization spread across multiple time zones, there is a high chance that your security operations department has some sort of follow-the-sun model, shift, or at least on call to deal with more critical alerts and incidents. Remember that SecOps teams are at the forefront of action, and they must be ready to protect the company at a moment's notice. If your company follows a follow-the-sun or shift model, there will be a handover of the most relevant activity in a sort of report or informal conversation from shift to shift, so that the new shift can carry on with the investigation or investigations started by the previous shift. This is the power of a full-blown SOC. 24/7 coverage, where sub-teams of analysts rotate over time to ensure a fresh pair of eyes at all times. Now, shift work is not for everyone, especially if your company requires 24/7 coverage and doesn't have resources and teams across several time zones to guarantee that model. That means that you are going to work graveyard shifts. Shifts in general are most likely one of the main reasons why SecOps teams have such high burnout and churn rates when compared to any other team within the cybersecurity industry. Messed up sleeping patterns combined with high stress are the kind of cocktail that can wreck your mental health in a matter of months. And that's all, folks. In this video, I described what you can expect if you decide to become a SecOps analyst. SOC jobs are not always fun, but they are most likely one of the best ways to bootstrap your career, as you will learn a lot about blue team operations and techniques employed by threat actors. SOC jobs have highs and lows, where days of utter boredom and dullness from repetitive tasks can be followed by days or even weeks of incident response engagements with all hands on deck and strict deadlines. Are you considering a SOC job? Perhaps you have joined the security operations team recently. Regardless, let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, stay safe, stay paranoid.